If you don't have a network, if you don't show a pipeline that you can bring in work in the future, typically you're not going to make partner. I mean, I now talk quite a bit about AI with deep fake evidence. You're trying to work out actually how to minimise things like that you could be receiving from another party, particularly if they're used to litigating in other jurisdictions. I tend to find that sometimes riskier. So you have to work out where those pressure points are and just plan ahead. Every day I wake up to a new email because the market's rallied or it's crashed or there's a new coin out, a new meme coin. And I just think it's just so interesting that it means that I just really enjoy what we do.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Charlote Hill. Charlote is a partner at Penningtons Manches Cooper, specialising in commercial dispute resolution, financial services regulation, restructuring and insolvency. Described as a next-generation partner by the Legal 500, Charlote is passionate about her work in the sector and has been awarded Women of the Year, FinTech and Crypto Innovation UK at the City Wealth Power Women Awards. So, a very big warm welcome to the show, Charlote.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. I'm really pleased to be here.
Super excited to have you on the show today. And before we dive into your amazing career and all the things you're doing in and around the world of law, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
I have seen it. I've seen all of them. I absolutely adore Suits. I would say the reality is now we're on probably a 2 or a 3, but pre-pandemic, given that everybody used to be in the office and was walking around in their power suits and in court all the time, at that point I would have gone about a 5 or 6.
There we go. And very justified in your answer. And with that, we can move swiftly on to talk all about you. So to begin with, Charlote, would you mind telling us, our listeners, a bit about your background and career journey?
Yeah, sure. So I've always wanted to be a lawyer. Ever since I was 10 years old, apart from I think I had about 1 week where I wanted to be a surgeon because I'd watched Casualty one night. Then I thought, no, that's not for me. And yeah, I always wanted to go into the law. I didn't quite know what type at that time, obviously being so young, but I was always quite focused and ambitious and aimed for that, despite coming from a really ordinary sort of working class background, state school educated and the like. Yeah. And so I spent sort of a couple of years going around universities. I think I went to Nottingham Law School, did a sort of a long weekend there when I was about 15 to look into it. Really put me off Nottingham because where they stayed was really smelly in one of those sort of old rooms that probably doesn't exist anymore. But straight away I thought, right, Nottingham's not for me. Yeah. And was really kind of looking into the criminal bar to begin with, actually, and took some mini pupilages and thought, and after having some awful stories and things in court that I'd heard, I just thought that's not for me, sadly. And so, yeah, I did my A-levels, went to Cardiff Uni, read law there because I really fancied the rugby weekends and thought it was great fun. Great law school as well, but I kind of looked at for the social part as well. And then really moved on from there and found my first job straight out of law school in London at a smaller boutique litigation firm. Really cut my teeth on some really interesting cases just out of the recession. So it was a really interesting time, lots of subprime lending issues going on, and ended up straight into litigation, which wasn't what I thought, having been through, having read law at uni and then been through law school, wasn't at all what I thought I was going to do. I remember being in law school, hating learning about the civil procedure rules and thinking this white book is so dry. And then I got into practice and suddenly I was like, this is fun. It's like playing chess. We've got a strategy. We've got some fast paced work. I've got some deadlines. And that compared to when I was sitting in kind of the M&A and corporate seats at that time because of recession were just dead. And we were just article writing and things really, really stuck out for me. And so, yeah, I qualified 2013, I think it was, stayed at that firm for a few years, really cutting my teeth. Being in a smaller firm meant I could really sort of get stuck in and get involved in some of these cases. And I was running my own cases in litigation from day one as a qualified solicitor, which was brilliant. And then I moved to PMC, Penningtons Manches Cooper, 2016 as an associate and have worked up through and now find myself as one of our 16 partners in our team in commercial disputes.
Absolutely, and hugely successful and high flying. And I guess that leads nicely to what I was going to ask next. Typical day. You are a partner, as you say, at the firm. What does that look like for you? Talk us through it.
There is no typical day. And I know that's so cliched. I'm sorry for saying it, but It's just so varied. I try and have 1 or 2 days where I work from home if I can, to lock myself away and really get my head down, and progress some of my matters for my clients and strategize and the like, and set direction for my team to go about, and do what they need to do. But then equally, I could be at a conference speaking. I do quite a bit of that. I could be traveling to meet a client somewhere. Could well be partner meetings, team meetings, talking about recruitment and firm strategy and the like. So it's really varied, but that's what I really like about it, because I think if I had the same kind of work every day, I would definitely get bored.
Yeah.
And I like that mixture where at times it's obviously really challenging, right? We all have to juggle so many balls, but it keeps me on my toes, which is what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I like dynamic days. A lot of listeners will know, I wear a few hats across sort of, legal tech businesses, recruiting, podcasting, getting to speak to great voices like yourself. And I think it keeps you energized as well. I find when you've got sort of different things coming at you. I want to talk about the kind of leaning onto culture and team a little bit, because your firm were recognized in the lawyer's latest report as one of the top 3 of the top 50 UK law firms for female partner promotions since 2020. So managing your team as a partner at the firm, how do you create a more open and inclusive environment so others in your team can come to you when they need help?
First and foremost, you have to lead by example. And I think it's talking on opportunities like this and other platforms where you're able to talk about what's been hard for you and what is a challenge, as an individual, let alone as a female, or, different things that we all have going on that are challenges for us individually. And so talking about what's hard, talking about what's worked for us. And as I say, leading by example and actually showing, I very much, I talk to my team about when I take time out and why I'm taking time out, and actually just the fact that I'm just saying, look, I just need an hour to switch off. I need to go to the gym. I need to take my dog for that walk, whatever it is. I just need to clear my head, and being really open and honest about that, which then I hope encourages juniors to adopt a similar approach, or at least to have that discussion with me or with somebody else in the team if they feel they need to. I'm so proud of that statistic when that came out. So proud. As a firm, we've done amazingly. There's always more work to do on those sorts of statistics, and generally in the DE&I space. But we've got, our CEO is female. When you add in our heads of departments across our strategy board, we've got more females than male now, only just, but we've got more females. And obviously we're very much growing, as you say, statistically with partner promotions. And I was one of those in that promotion round that was mentioned. And it's great having just a real mix of normal people working together to lead a firm. And that, I hope, really does set that example for juniors to see that actually that is achievable if that's what they want to do, and that there's a path through for them. And one of the ways that we very much have worked quite hard recently is to enhance our parental rights responsibilities and the like. So, a lot more people now across the firm can take a lot more opportunity to take time out and to share, when you've got young children, which is one of the big barriers, isn't it, to particularly females going up to partnership. Sadly, many still feel they have to step out, and therefore career takes a sidestep. But we've now got many opportunities where lots of I think the last 3 lots of parental leave in my team have all been males taking sort of 6 months plus off to be able to take that time with their family. And to let their partner go back to work if that's what they want to do, which is great. And I think hopefully should become the norm for everybody going forward.
Yeah, because they are, speaking as a girl dad here, they're precious moments, aren't they? And I think you don't get those back. And I think there's also great initiatives like the future president a few years out, Dana Denise Smith, who's been on the show, friend of ours, OB, who's doing great things with like oblit support and, really trying to help. So people, like you say, understand that they can still have the career and have a family in conjunction. And I love that you talk about authenticity. You're leading with authenticity, aren't you, with what you're saying in terms of, because we're all human, and I think actually leading with some vulnerability at times to say, I need this break, or actually I don't have the answers right now, or we'll come back to it. I think it just makes people feel like they're a safe space, and it's that human to human connection you have with people, and you build trust and safe spaces, and then within that people then can grow. Okay, I want to talk now about switching lanes quite drastically to crypto and cybersecurity, because you specialize in an area I'm all in and fascinated on in terms of emerging tech and digital assets disputes. So that is sort of all things crypto, cyber. So where did your interest in these areas specifically come from?
Do you know what? it's a really roundabout way how I've ended up leading the firm's digital asset team. It's not a kind of a clear path. It was about 2017, I just started learning, probably quite late to the party, sadly. If I'd have been a bit earlier, I would have invested in the Bitcoin, but learning about crypto and just thinking, well, this is really interesting. And my background is sort of financial services litigation, fraud and asset tracing, and a bit of insolvency. And I could just see this new asset class coming through, thinking, well, I'm going to be litigating about this one day. There's no two ways about it. This is coming at some point in the future. So I better kind of clue up about it. And so I just started, reading books, listen to podcasts, all the kind of usual sort of stuff, just when you're interested in something quite genuinely. And just from a pure sort of tech industry perspective rather than from a legal perspective. And then, that's when I started kind of pulling the two together and thinking, well, here's some, there's some common synergies here. This is going to be really interesting. And so it really just developed from there. And then I remember going to CryptoCon in Gibraltar, which was really good fun. I met loads of people in the industry, and that was about early 2019, I think it might have been, and just starting to get into it. And so I've started speaking about it, talking to my team about it, and realizing actually across our firm, we had a lot of people that had similar interests and actually had a lot of expertise that they could bring from not just litigation, but from all sides of sort of, because we're full service firm, so all sides of the coin, and could work, build this team together. And so, here I am years later, as I say, leading this sort of multidisciplinary team across various different offices we've got at PMC, all about digital assets, emerging tech. And it's just a really interesting space. And I think if you enjoy what you do, then actually the rest just comes naturally. And, from a disputes perspective, as litigators or disputes practitioners, our expertise is litigation, for example. Actually, it's not about a certain industry necessarily. Some do, and some go in quite bespoke areas, but I keep my practice quite broad on purpose. And so actually you can quite quickly subsume yourself into these new industries. And once you can talk the talk and understand some of the lingo, it's brilliant fun. It's always changing. Every day I wake up to a new email because the market's rallied or it's crashed or there's a new coin out, a new meme coin. And I just think it's just so interesting that it means that I just really enjoy what we do.
Love it. And there's some really good lessons in there as well. And because we're recording just before 12, it's a GM to you in crypto language as well, right? GM. But I think there's a lesson in there around, particularly in the world of AI that we're living now, that you were curious. There was a growth mindset. You were reading about it. You were leaning into where the puck is going. The famous Wayne Gretzky quote that we all know, Kate, where the puck is going. And as a result of that, birthed opportunities for you from a career perspective, and actually probably put yourself out of your comfort zone. Like you said, going to events, speaking, maybe where you're not the expert, but start now and then gather expertise over time and you'll develop. And I think there's a really nice success story there to where you are obviously now in terms of leading. So for people that are sort of observing things that are going on and looking forwards, take action, go to those events, say yes to that speaking opportunity, go and connect with somebody like Charlotte, and you'll be amazed about what could happen. Okay, just diving a little bit deeper then in terms of the types of works. I know it's super interesting for people who may be wanting a little bit more understanding of like what things you're involved in. Could you give us a bit of your diet of work that you're involved in and what some of the cases might look like?
Yeah, sure. So from a disputes perspective, most of the disputes in this industry have been around fraud. So unfortunately, as we know, there have been so many scams and Ponzi schemes and the like that have come out using crypto for obvious reasons. So the first one that I was involved in that was reported was a case where I was actually defending one of the companies that had innocently received some stolen Bitcoin. And this poor chap who'd had, I think roughly it was about £8 million worth of Bitcoin stolen, had gone after 20 odd parties. And so my client was one of those parties that was caught up essentially in this fraud, but completely innocently. And so we defended that and we managed to get the case against our client discontinued. All of their assets had been frozen. We got the freezer lifted. Client could then eventually walk away. But it was I think it was the first reported case that had been contested, because prior to that point in 2020, I think it was. I'm trying to think now which year we're in. Prior to that point, it was just simply one party was going to court. It was against persons unknown. My Bitcoin, for example, has been stolen. Can we freeze it? Can we protect it? And ideally, if I've got a proprietary interest, can I get it back? So that was kind of the start of these sorts of cases. And since then, there have been lots of contested cases of similar vein where there's a fraud or somebody somehow lost their crypto and they're trying to get it back. The good news for me is that we are now, that's still around, unfortunately. And I've got another case where I've got 100 odd claimants that are looking to pursue a fraudster and get their crypto back. So that still goes on. But they are now just moving to more mature disputes. So they're now just quite normal business to business disputes. I had one last summer, actually. It kept my summer very busy, which I hadn't planned, but it was great. Well, one of my clients is a UK exchange, and one of their contractors had, they alleged, stolen sensitive data in order to set up a competing business. And so we were having to deal with that, obviously get that data back. And look to injunction. We got an injunction against that individual to stop them advancing a competing business. And that was going on to a speedy trial. And we managed again to compromise that and settle that. Then they now just move on to, like I say, business to business disputes, normal contractual disputes, all the sort of usual disputes that we as commercial litigators see. The difference, though, is I would say, and I think my clients will probably agree, you can't, unfortunately, just have a normal litigator who doesn't understand this space dealing with it, or not as easily, because you do need to understand the industry. It's very different being in the DeFi world, decentralized finance world, offline. There's nowhere. It's really hard when you're trying to grapple with jurisdiction and things, where you're going to lodge your claim, how you're able to do it, how you're able to recover it, all these sorts of things. And if you don't understand that, the decentralized nature of it, and indeed the type of people that tend to operate in this space, then arguably you're not going to get the same sort of results. And so that's where I think, and that there's a lot of very good litigators now in London, particularly, that are in this space. I mean, I don't know if you know, I'm part of the CFAR network. I'm a director there, which was established many years ago now, which is exactly that. It's a group of like-minded lawyers, practitioners, experts, and the like, that all come together, that work for the greater good to promote this industry that we have, because it's an amazing space. And actually, this sort of DeFi space, as we're calling it, will soon become normal. It will become sort of the TradFi, normal traditional finance, and we're all going to be talking about it like it was, it's never been brand new in 5 years' time, I think.
Exactly, and that's the way I see it. Of course, it's it takes time for adoption, and it takes time for everyone to kind of see it, but it's absolutely going to happen, and that's why we want to have these sort of conversations and educate people and the professionals doing work in and around it, and indeed the good work that you're doing and sharing your message. You've touched across a number of different work experiences you've had. Is there one particular memorable case you've had to date that you'd like to share with us, and if so, why?
I don't think there's one in particular. The sort of work I enjoy the most, actually, I mean, I love working for big global companies for a whole variety of reasons, but the ones that really stick with me are the businesses that I'm acting for that are family-led businesses. They could be massive corporate structures, but you've still got that family at the top of the group that are controlling it.
Yeah.
And for me, actually, being able to achieve whatever the result is that they're looking for, or to stop that piece of litigation before it snowballs, or whatever it is really satisfying, because you see the cash moving whichever way it's going to move, and you've managed to mitigate the risk or bring in some damages or whatever it is for them. But actually seeing that personal effect on them as a family, as you say, that human element, that's what really makes it for me. And that's when you think, actually, that was worth those really long hours that myself and my team worked, and all the blood, sweat and tears that we shed as a result. You think that, it really sort of makes it worthwhile.
And it's that intrinsic value, isn't it? You've helped out a family at the end of the day. Exactly. in what it would be. You used a word there, which I wanted to ask you next. Actually, it leads nicely on around risk, because when you are advising on these big cross-border litigation, especially multiple jurisdictions, what is your actual approach to managing the legal risk?
It really varies depending on what the type of risk is and what the client's goal is. So it could simply be a case where you say to your client, you're defending a matter, and essentially say, look, you're going to have to pay something here. You're going to have to pay probably some large sums. Obviously you're not telling your opponent anywhere near that. But, when you're advising the client, you are on the hook here. So what can we do to minimize that for you? And actually, what is that risk? Is it just financial? Is it reputational? Is it, it could well put your company into restructuring or insolvency processes, trying to work out for them where the real pressure points are, and then work out a roadmap in order to get them the best outcome for them at that time. And it's quite likely, particularly if you're defending an action, it's not going to be one that they ever want, sadly. Yeah. But it's still trying to work out what that best worst outcome is for them, and then position them in a way strategically, as I say, to strategize to get them there at a certain point in time. The other way, of course, as the claimant, is you've got other risks coming at you where suddenly, there could be unknown pieces of evidence that come out. I mean, I now talk quite a bit about AI with deep fake evidence. You're trying to work out actually how to minimize things like that you could be receiving from another party, particularly if they're used to litigating in other jurisdictions. I tend to find that sometimes riskier. So you have to work out, again, it's where those pressure points are, and just plan ahead and do what you can at all times. And I think always for me, particularly when I talk to my clients, I always just say, let's just take a step back. Let's just reflect, like we can get into the detail and we will get into the detail, but high level, let's just reflect on what we really want here. And then we'll find a way through it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio, leaders in legal tech and the team behind one of the most exciting AI launches this summer. Clio Duo is arriving this summer and it's already creating a stir. Built right into Clio Manage, Duo uses AI to help you draft emails, capture time, summarize documents automatically. It's smart, seamless, and designed to save you hours every week. Find out more and see what Clio Duo can do for your firm at clio.com/UK. Now back to the show. I love how you're just transparent. You gave an example there before where it's like you are going to have to pay something here. And I think sometimes clients respect that, don't they? I think the worst thing that can happen is mismanagement of clients' expectations, or, the silver bullet that, that just for whatever reason it doesn't exist. And I think that's a really smart area where lawyers can learn from that in terms of, not every case is probably going to be exactly this silver bullet and exactly that. But I think you're going to do your absolute best and tell them that, the strategy, and keep constant communication and do absolutely everything in your power. But the reality is this. And I think that brings a lot more mutual respect. You used the word AI there. Of course, we're talking a lot about AI on the show, and we'll continue to do so probably till the end of time, given the way it's going. But when it comes to your actual practice area, though, AI and indeed automation becoming even more prominent in legal practice, how do you see tech playing a really key role in litigation now and moving forwards?
I mean, it's here already, right? As in, for generally, but for litigation in particular, and it's only going to grow. So I'm fortunate. I'm on our firm's working AI policy group. So we've brought in a lot of people all across the firm to sort of develop this policy. And we're taking a cautious approach, I'd say, actually. We haven't jumped in like some others have and brought, all of the singing and dancing pieces of AI that should do everything that still doesn't, arguably. But we are bringing in, and we're very much looking at business use cases, and we are using AI tools for the right job. And so, for example, our real estate team have got the most amazing piece of software that can analyze titles in seconds rather than weeks. And I had a big property fraud recently where they had exactly that. There was 150 odd properties they need to look at as to whether my client even owned the properties, and if so, what the terms were and the leases and the like. And within about half a day, they'd produce this most amazing schedule for me that I could then analyze and manipulate and understand in order to deal with this fraud. So, we are using it. Litigation wise, we're using it in terms of we have, the sort of the AI research tools. We are looking to bring AI into our document management system to help kind of just, summarizing things and checking compliance points and things like that. We're not yet using it for, obviously we use it for things like doc review and things, but we're not yet using it for testing of evidence and witness statements and the like. And I know that's something I've been speaking actually with some of the judges about that at various different events with the LSLA. And that's something that the courts are very much still grappling with, and whether that's going to be even permitted, and if so, quite how, and whether we need to be disclosing that and being transparent with our opponents and with the court. So we're not yet using it for that purpose, but I know other firms are, and I've heard actually really positive things about it. So I think it's here to stay. And I think actually we all very much need to get on board with it, because the problem is if we don't now, even though a lot of it isn't yet perfect, 6 months' time, we're going to be so much further behind, and then trying to play catch up will be nigh on impossible.
Exactly. We've had Piers Linney from Dragon's Den, co-founder of Implement AI, come on, and we've done a lot of collaboration together. Actually, he talks a lot about the ship has left the harbour.
Yeah.
So, that is not turning around. Whether you like it or lump it, it's going in that direction. And
Yes.
now if you haven't adapted, you need to at least start to try and play a level, because it's just going to continually go at exponential fast speed. So I think, like you say, is absolutely so true. Okay, we've talked a lot about sort of, there are lawyers in the crypto space. There are some in the dispute space. I would argue there's room for more. So some lawyers are perhaps hesitant in terms of engaging with crypto disputes. So what would you say to those who might be unsure about stepping into this space, potentially future lawyers as well?
Well, I think flipping future lawyers, I mean, this is such a great space for them. I mean, assuming, and typically most of my juniors do, assuming that as a junior you have an interest in tech and these new modern ways of the world, like I say, this kind of DeFi space. Because I do think if you don't have an interest, just don't bother, to be perfectly frank, because you'll only go so far if it's just because you think I should do this for my career. But if you're into it, I think actually, as you said earlier, Rob, I think raise your hand, come along to these events, speak to me, to my peers, to my colleagues, to others in this industry, and actually just ask questions, because we all have to start somewhere. As you say, we're all human, we're all perfectly nice and normal, most of us are. And we will happily, I mean, I will chat to my heart's content, about this. I could chat about this all day, this sort of interesting area. So I think just get involved and get stuck in. I think for those that are already, have their own experiences in different areas, I think so long as you are using the right experts who obviously understand the industry really well, and so long as you're using the right barristers as well, as solicitors that can advocate properly for you, to explain it properly, I think there is space. However, there are some people out there, unfortunately, that say they understand it and just don't, because they just think it is just another asset class, and so we can deal with it like we can deal with sterling. And unfortunately, you just can't. It is just different. And unless you're going to invest the time and the energy in really understanding it properly, and actually, unless you're going to get into the industry and meet the key players in the industry who will gladly help you and educate you again from an industry perspective and a technical perspective, then I just think don't bother, because there's so many other areas of law out there, particularly in litigation, that you could get into. So if you're doing it just because you think you should, and you need to jump on that bandwagon, I would say forget it. But if you've got any element of an interest, come along to CFAR events and other events that various different communities organise, and just get stuck in, because we all want to share. We all recognise actually there's going to be so much work. Well, there's already so much work out there for us all. There's going to be a lot more. So it's not as though we're all trying to keep it just for ourselves and we're going to have a battle. It's not that kind of community. So I think get stuck in and see what happens.
And the word there, community, it's something I'm super passionate about and believe in. And lots of people actually say to me, Rob, I've seen another legal podcast start. Are you worried? Or I've seen, no, I think it's good. I think it's, where there's things happening shows there's demand, shows there's interest, shows there's growth. And people, if you're good enough, you're always going to be able to find enough anyway. And I think a good point you mentioned there is meant to be very early on. Every master's wants a disaster, right? Just start, start, grapple, understand, learn as you go along. And I think that's been a good theme throughout this discussion. Okay, one of the things that get talked about regularly when it comes to crypto, of course, is regulation. So do you believe there's enough regulation surrounding crypto? And if not, what changes would you like to see the government actually implement?
A good question. There is more talk now about future regulation, and the FCA has finally started to sort of get its wheels in motion, and there's now going to be regulating stable coins, and they're looking at kind of all the ETFs and the like, which are now around for retail customers. So there is regulation in place, and there is going to be more regulation over the next coming years. The whole aim behind regulation, as we know, is to protect, particularly from the FCA perspective, to protect consumers. Yeah. And the real risk here, and as I said, a lot of the disputes that have gone on so far in this industry are about fraud, and unfortunately they are Joe Bloggs off the street who's invested his pension or something in crypto and sadly doesn't understand it properly. And it has been, it ruins their lives.
Yeah.
So regulation does need to happen without a doubt. And that protection needs to be in place. The problem is a lot of the regulation that's been there so far, or the little that there is, has been stymieing business and has been preventing it from growing and testing and developing as it should, as most sort of startup industries need to find out what works, what doesn't work, how we need to move different paths and things. And so as a result, a lot of businesses have either not grounded themselves in the UK, and when they were looking at jurisdiction shopping where to go, they've decided not to come here, or they've left here. And that, that was particularly 3, 4, 5 years ago now, when, people were looking for licenses and the like. And actually the FCA were just taking so long. They said, right, well, we're out, or you're asking far too many questions, or whatever it is. So I think there's a balance to be had. And I don't think we're there yet. I think there is still more work that needs to be done. I think the Law Commission have been doing great work, though. They've been lobbying Parliament, but they've also been collaborating with industry, with the legal teams. And as a result, they've been feeding that back, and having that bridge has been really helpful. And I think that's the way this needs to continue going, with the FCA, as they do actually, seeking consultations and feedback, but actually people putting in the time and effort to complete those consultations and providing that feedback. Because if we don't tell the FCA what is or isn't working for our clients, and if our clients don't do that, then they're never going to improve. So I think, again, it kind of goes back to that collaboration piece that I think has to happen in order for the greater good to go forward.
Yeah, and my listeners will be sick to death of me saying it, but collaboration is domination, and it's so true. And you were touching there around the FCA, because it was going to be my next question, actually, because you have featured on other podcasts, which, again, we absolutely support, the Legal 500 Legal Landscapes podcast, where you discussed, actually, the Property Digital Assets Bill and the FCA's evolving role, as you're touching on there. So for businesses, what are the key developments they need to know aimed at actually tackling illegal crypto activity, in your opinion?
I think it is understanding how they can operate within the legal framework within the UK. And that isn't, unfortunately, that straightforward an answer. And the problem is, a lot of these businesses are coming in at a startup point where clearly they don't have much budget to spend. Yeah. And this kind of advice isn't quick and easy, and therefore it's not cheap. And so, unfortunately, we have many clients that come to us when things start to go wrong. And at that point, they say, well, we need help. And then you really have to help them unpick the situation and then build it back up properly. By which point, if you're looking at getting regulated, or you're already regulated in some way, shape or form, you've lost the FCA faith and you have to start to build it back up. So I actually think it is starting from the ground up, working with these businesses at whatever level and whatever budget they have, to help them navigate their business case and whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So, if they are trying to sell into the UK market, then suddenly they've got lots of FCA perimeter work around them that they need to be complying with. And it's helping them just build those blocks as they grow. And again, managing that risk, because there's always a risk, and it's just working out how we can reduce that as much as possible. And indeed, how our clients can show to the regulators that they're doing what they can within their ambit, in order to protect the people that need protecting while developing the business.
I love that point. 'Cause it's so, the point you mentioned there is like doing what you can, actually showing you're doing, because doing nothing is a risk, right? And so, what you're alluding to there is what, again, when I first started setting up businesses, it's getting the right infrastructure, or getting the absolute best, because otherwise you could be building on quicksand, and that could potentially cause you catastrophic errors. Typically when the business first starts, unless it's a really key piece of IP, or there's some form of technology that has got exponential growth, the business is worth nothing. But actually, as over time, it's going to quite accrue value in some capacity. And if you've not got the right infrastructure, or continually working on managing that risk, as you say, then you potentially are decreasing depending on what your goals are. But if you're looking for an exit or acquisition or raising, these are super important things. And that's why getting good quality counsel is so vital. Okay, I want to talk about some of your wider roles. And there's a fair few here, because you're the chair of the EMIR Multi-Laws Young Lawyers Group, vice chair of the Cyber Insurance Association, vice chair of the Law Society's Civil Justice Committee. I've probably missed a load as well, but just talking through each of those roles, what projects have you contributed to and most proud of?
Oh gosh, yeah, like you say, I've done lots, and this goes back to, I think, some of the early bits we were discussing. Sort of as a junior, I was always really keen to get involved in networks. I recognised really early on the value of a network, and I just love meeting people and picking their brains. Actually, I'm just really nosy. Probably why I'm a good litigator. I have a thirst for information and for knowledge. So. I got involved. I got involved really early on with the junior London Solicitors Litigation Association, and led there as the president, and then went on to the main committee when I sadly got too old and couldn't be part of the real fun ones. But so from the LSLA, that then opened up a whole other raft of doors for me. And that's when I first learned about the Law Society Council having a role available. And so I represent at the moment civil litigators, all civil litigators across the country, apart from personal injury, which is a terrifying number of people trying to represent and advocate for them. But actually being involved on the Law Society, and that's how I know Dana Dennis Smith really well as well, it has been really interesting, because you sit there and you learn about, I'm a litigator in London. I do cross-border fraud, commercial dispute type work. It's very bespoke when you, and I realised that, and I reflected on that when you then look at actually what, say, for example, all civil litigators do, and you hear about the guy in wherever up north that is a one-man band or a two-man band having these really awful experiences to do with, court backlogs in the county courts or whatever it is. And it's really eye-opening, and actually being able to advocate for everybody in that sphere, and to try to push forward reform for the greater good has been, I've been really proud of doing that. I think it's been an amazing experience. And it's kind of opened other doors. So as you say, on the Civil Justice Committee, which then we're inputting into, sort of all the cost reform and funding reforms and changes in the CPR and various different things. So again, that kind of then brings it back for me, for my job, and what civil litigators do, then we can then have an influence on that and share our experiences to then shape it for the greater good for our clients who choose to litigate in this jurisdiction.
And it speaks to so many things that I talk about, which is the two I's really in business, which is either having good quality information or good quality influence. And you do that through what I describe as NSN, never stop networking, right? And you're continuously doing that and building around and wrapping around networks. And even for our listeners that know, for the show, even though we're 400 odd episodes in, we first started our first ever episode, remember to this day, with the London Young Lawyers Group, because we knew that was an access community at the time that was run by the brilliant Oliver Haddock, who's now running the Careers Edit, and obviously Nicola, who's fantastic. And, that was a way to kind of build and get noticed and network, and new opportunities come off the back of that. And like you say, the more you kind of immerse yourself and get into this networking and growth mindset, the more things come your way. Absolutely love it. And I know you do a lot to help the next generation, particularly, something passionate about yourself. So is there anything in particular, people listening to this, that you do in terms of helping them that's worth just flagging?
Yeah, I think there actually is, Rob. Myself and Maria Miller, a barrister at Maitland Chambers, created a network called A Mindful Lawyer.
Yeah.
3 years ago now, I think. Honestly, I lose track of time. Time just flies. I would have said a year ago, but we've definitely had at least 3 years worth of events now. And ironically, we started this network after a couple of glasses of wine and some dinner. Yeah. And Maria won't mind me sharing her story with you, which was that she said, "This has been lovely, Charlotte, but I now need to get home. At that time, her 1-year-old daughter, has gone to bed. I didn't get to see her tonight, but I'd love to get up early and spend some time with her tomorrow before she goes to nursery. I go to work." Yeah. And actually, we then said, well, why do we always have to network like this? Why does it have to be into an evening, having some drinks? I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love doing that. I'm all for it. But, why do we have to do that all the time? Why can't we network in the morning or at lunchtime or whenever throughout the day that suits us? And why can't we do something that isn't always having a few drinks and then not feeling the best the next day? And so we created A Mindful Lawyer with a view to doing just that, networking differently, essentially. And it was aimed particularly at, and it is aimed particularly at, well, it's all levels, but I particularly wanted to do this to help my juniors, because the new cohort of juniors coming through typically, want different things now. They don't want to be working necessarily such long hours. They don't want to be going out of an evening, eating and drinking, getting in late, feeling tired, not being able to go to the gym. Yeah. It's just a different sort of vibe, I suppose, as to what I grew up when I was training. Mine was a very different thing. Yeah. But accepting that and embracing that and actually encouraging that is something that I really wanted to do. And I wanted to make sure that we could help juniors network still, because the problem is if you just decide I'm going to come into the office, and actually I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago with Oliver Haddock saying exactly this, which is you can't just go into your office, do your work and go home. You have to network. You have to do BD. That's part of your job, even as a really baby junior. That's still part of your job. And I think that is true whether you want to become partner or not. But certainly, having been through the partnership track over the last 5 years or so, having been there, if you don't have a network, if you don't show a pipeline that you can bring in work in the future, typically you're not going to make partner. And so for me, getting my juniors involved, even at trainee level, I think is key. And I line manage a few trainees, and I'll say, well, what are you doing BD wise? And they'll say, well, I'm writing an article or something. I'm like, brilliant, fab, that's great. But what about these events? I'm going to all these events. Why don't you come with me? And they're like, oh, well, can I? Absolutely. Of course you can. Please do, go to as many as you can. And so a mindful lawyer was created with that in mind. And so we have hosted morning yoga classes at the Sky Gardens, followed by networking breakfast. We've hosted this is my exercise themed ones, but spin classes of an evening, but then with some drinks and non-alcoholic drinks after for those who want to stay. Lunchtime breathwork sessions. We've done, we've hosted panel events for things like International Women's Day. We did an afternoon at a vineyard. So a whole variety of things. But it's really interesting because you see the certain types of people. I couldn't even say what those types are, but certain individuals always want to come in the morning, and it suits them because for whatever reason. Others just can do lunchtime and they say, literally, I need to pop in for 45 minutes and pop out. Others say, do you know what? Actually, I'd love that glass of wine after a spin class. Once I got the endorphins going, let's have a chat and let's network. And so it just creates those opportunities that I hope people can find ways to network that they might not otherwise have done. That means actually they can enjoy it and they want to do it rather than feeling forced and dragged along. And yeah, that's what we're still trying to grow. And it's been going from strength to strength, but there's lots more and hopefully we'll get more involved.
Yeah, and it's like a flywheel effect. A lot of people would have read the book Good to Great, and it's about energy inputs, whatever it is. And I always think of yourself as the energy, the more that you can put in terms of events, collaborations, network, the more the momentum starts picking up, the more opportunities, the red car theory, all of these things start happening to you. And as our listeners will know, and I say it all the time, you're only one relationship away from changing your life. It could be a mentor, could be the next hiring manager, business opportunity, whatever it might be. And I think that's why you just need to be around people with that like-minded energy. To bring out that in you. And I think it's great what you're doing. And, we've seen that when earlier this year we were out in Ibiza with the Lawyers Retreat doing some yoga focused interviews as well. But, off the back of that, we've also then gone on and we'll be releasing a live lounge, which with DJs that have done stuff with Calvin Harris and David Guetta. So all these things come out of kind of putting yourself in the situation and getting out there and meeting people and all of that good stuff. And I just absolutely love what you're doing. So I think it's the modern professional. And I think the other thing you mentioned there is, well, nothing changes and nothing changes, right? And the next generation don't want to do what you and I did. It's just a fact. And if you do, you'll have a high retention rate and your reputation will go down the pan. Embrace it and actually look at the good and actually meet them where they're at, because lifestyle matters to them. Wellness matters to them. They don't want to get burned to death by the billable hour. It's not for them. And so if you recognize that and actually collaborate and put on good stuff, then you're going to bring out the best of people and it's going to be a win-win. This has been an absolute fun masterclass of an episode. Really enjoyed it, Charlotte. I know I could sort of speak to you for hours, but if I could kind of bring it to a closing question, and you've given so much advice throughout, so it's probably going to be a little bit tricky, but for those that would like, again, focusing on the next generation, what advice do you have for aspiring solicitors who are interested in commercial disputes and indeed financial services regulation and want to learn more? Maybe one or two top tips.
I think for all aspiring next gen type lawyers, don't stop trying. Just get involved. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be good at everything, but try it. And if it doesn't work, that's absolutely fine. We're all going to fail. And when we fail, we're then going to get better. And it's not failure. It's just part of your success story. So I just think keep going along, keep showing up, keep raising your hand. That's what I've always done. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't worked. But I think it really stands you in good stead. And I think you're right, Rob, that I think, from that energy, you get more energy and you vibe off each other, which is brilliant. So I think that's my main piece. Financial services, crypto. I think if you've got an interest, just come along. There are so many events going on now. There are so many conferences, but don't just come along, sit there, take a note and go home. Actually come along, ask a question. There is no stupid question. And I know everybody says that. I know everyone cringe and we think, oh, come on, but it's so true. And actually just reach out to those of us that are in the space and ask, can I come along? Can I have a chat with you after? Could we have a coffee? 9 times out of 10, those people are going to say yes, because as you say, it's very much paying it forward. People have done that for me over the years, and I'm more than happy to do that for others that have an interest. And, just pick our brains, and it might help, it might not, but worst case, you've had a nice conversation with somebody.
Love it. Yeah. And fortune is in the follow-up. I think information is great, as I alluded to, but it's acting on information or moving to the next step, because you've got to move things forward. And I love that you talked about, again, lots of lawyers get stuck on this, but done is better than perfect, because perfect never gets done. There is no sort of form of perfect out there. And again, I love that you talked to also about, I've had loads of rejection. The Leading Speaking podcast would have never been a thing if I had listened to a lot of people or the knockbacks that had happened along the way. And then we've obviously gone on and look at yourself in terms of your career and what you're leading and what you're doing at the very height. So again, our remind our listeners of my acronym, which is LOSE, which stands for Life Offering Some Experience. So you never actually lose. You take that experience and you move forward. This has been wonderful. Thoroughly enjoyed it, Charlotte. If our listeners want to learn more about you or indeed the firm or things you're involved with, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites, any social media handles. We'll also share them in this episode for you too.
Thank you. My main hangout is LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, as you've seen, Rob. I always follow all your 5Ks that you're doing.
Yeah.
So please reach out on LinkedIn, and then I'd love to chat more.
Thank you ever so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Wishing you lots of continued success. But for now, from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.